Have you ever wondered why a man who walked with God until God himself took him would have his writings stripped from nearly every Bible on earth? And why, in the one place the book survives, in the highlands of Ethiopia, it remains revered as Holy Scripture, while almost everywhere else it is dismissed as dangerous myth? The paradox is unsettling. Enoch appears in Genesis only briefly, a shadowed figure in a corrupt world, spiraling toward the flood. He is quoted directly in the New Testament book of Jude. Yet when you search the canon for Enoch's own words, you find silence, a silence heavy enough to feel deliberate. This video invites you into that silence. Imagine opening a sealed cave near the Dead Sea, unrolling a brittle scroll, and finding visions too strange to fit the faith you thought you knew. Angels abandoning heaven, forbidden unions with mortal women, monstrous giants devouring mankind, and a heavenly Son of Man seated beside God long before Bethlehem. If Enoch wrote of these things, why were they erased from the story we were given? Could it be that this book named heavenly rebellions that church councils later buried? That it spoke of Christ so clearly centuries before his birth that it threatened their control of the narrative? Or did it reveal truths about divine judgment so terrifying that only fragments survived in whispers? Today we follow the fragments: Genesis, Jude, Dead Sea Scroll caves, Ethiopian canons. We will piece together the story they tried to erase and ask the question few dare whisper aloud: why was Enoch's voice silenced? And what happens if we listen to it now? So subscribe and type in the comments where you're listening from if you're ready, because you won't want to miss this. Imagine opening Genesis 5, a chapter most readers skim. A genealogy, name after name, years lived, and children begotten. It is dry history, until suddenly one man's entry breaks the rhythm like a whispered secret. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more, because God took him. Genesis 5:24. Just 4 verses, no details of how he walked, no account of what he heard, no description of why God singled him out. Only silence, a silence that feels almost protective, as if what Enoch saw could not be safely recorded. Who was this man? The text gives fragments. He is 7th from Adam, great-grandfather to Noah, a hinge between the fading echoes of Eden and the coming chaos of the flood. He lived 365 years, an oddly perfect number, mirroring the solar days of a year. Was this a hint? Did the ancients mark his life as cosmically ordered, a life aligned to heavenly rhythms? Some scholars quietly note this, yet most sermons pass it by. Few ask why. Picture him walking among a world unraveling. The early earth is violent, swollen with pride and strange unions. Genesis 6 follows soon after. Sons of God descending, daughters of men taken, giants born. Was Enoch already warning of this before the flood waters were decreed? The Book of Enoch claims he saw the rebellion of angels firsthand, recorded their names, even interceded for them before God. But none of that appears in Genesis. Why omit it? Was the author shielding us, or were later scribes silencing him? Enoch's intimacy with God is unlike anyone else's. Moses meets God on Sinai in fire and cloud. Isaiah glimpses him in the temple, trembling at the vision. But Enoch is different. He does not return with commandments. He does not fall dead at the sight. He simply vanishes, one moment walking among mortals, the next taken into the eternal. Hebrews 11:5 affirms this. He did not experience death. For the ancients, this was shocking. Only Elijah shares this fate, carried to heaven in a whirlwind. The two men appear again in Revelation theories, speculated as the two witnesses who return at the end of days. Even here, conspiracy clings to Enoch's silence. Why did early Christians treat him with such reverence? Jude 1:14-15 quotes Enoch directly, even attributing prophecy to him. Behold, the Lord comes with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment. This is not marginal. It is the only direct prophecy of Christ's return in the New Testament that predates Moses. Yet the book it comes from was later labeled untrustworthy, apocryphal, even heretical. How could something so honored be so swiftly buried? Imagine standing in Enoch's sandals. Each day he walked with God while the world descended into corruption. He saw families fall apart, violence spread, whispers of angelic beings mingling with mortals. Perhaps he heard rumors of strange children born taller, stronger, hungrier than any man should be. He heard the laughter of men drunk on bloodshed beyond the hills, and in that silence he whispered, "Why me, Lord? Why choose me to walk with you while the world drowns in its own hatred?" Did these visions weigh on him? Did he wrestle with grief knowing judgment was coming? Some passages of Enoch's own book describe his laments, his prayers for doomed angels, his horror at the Nephilim's bloodlust. The man we call righteous was also a man burdened by visions he could not escape. And yet, his story in Genesis is all brevity and silence. A name, a walk, a disappearance. Almost as if Scripture itself is daring you to ask, what is missing? Why so little detail for the man who never died? The apocryphal texts claim to answer, but their existence alone raises troubling questions. Did later editors know more? Did they deliberately pare down his story, leaving us crumbs instead of the feast? Even the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in 1947, contained fragments of Enoch that shocked scholars by confirming how widely it circulated among Second Temple Jews. Why did so many hold it sacred, while later councils discarded it? Some believe the reason is simple: control. A text describing angels rebelling, naming names, teaching forbidden arts, could destabilize tidy theology. A book painting a vivid Messiah centuries before Bethlehem could disrupt claims that Jesus was an unexpected figure. A scroll hinting at hybrid giants could challenge neat categories of sin and salvation. In other words, Enoch might have revealed too much. If that is true, then the silence in Genesis is not neglect, but strategy, a whisper preserved for those willing to search the margins. And you are here now, searching those margins yourself. But this is only the beginning. Enoch's book does not merely fill in gaps, it opens floodgates. In its pages, angels descend. Oaths are sworn on mountain peaks. Forbidden knowledge spreads through human villages like wildfire. Giants rise, the world groans, and God prepares judgment. Few people realize this, but the very next chapter of Genesis, often read as a story about Noah's Ark, once had a darker prelude in Enoch's visions of a world on the brink of erasure. The question is not just why Enoch walked with God. The question is why God allowed him to see what no one else saw, and why, of all voices, his was later erased. Imagine finding a book quoted in the New Testament itself, praised by early Christians, yet absent from almost every modern Bible. A book that whispers of angels who rebel, of giants who consume the earth, of a Messiah enthroned before time. A book sealed away for centuries, surviving only in remote Ethiopian monasteries while Rome called it dangerous. Does that not stir something in you? Open its pages, and the first shock comes in silence. Genesis mentions Enoch briefly, almost shyly, as if hiding something. 4 verses in total. But the book that bears his name explodes those silences wide open. Here, angels have names: Semjaza, Azazel, Sariel. They descend upon Mount Hermon, their wings folding as they step into forbidden soil. And in the quiet of the valley below, daughters of men watch with wonder and terror as beings of fire and light draw near. I imagine Enoch, standing at the edge of the valley, breath caught in his chest. Were his prayers drowned out by the sound of wings folding? Did he tremble at the thought of what these unions would unleash? The Book of Enoch begins with the Watchers, 200 angels who swore an oath. If one descends, all descend. A pact whispered in rebellion. And here lies the first forbidden truth. Their desire was not simply lust, but curiosity. The text describes them gazing on humanity, marveling at fragile bodies and fleeting lives. In their longing to taste what mortals feel, they forsake heaven itself. Did Enoch pity them as he wrote these words? Or did he grieve, knowing heaven's longing would birth earth's ruin? One can almost hear him whisper, "Why show me this, Lord? Why me?" The implications are staggering. If angels can fall in love, can they also fall in sin? Enoch's visions speak of what happened next. These angels did not come empty-handed. They brought knowledge never meant for human hands. Azazel taught weapon-making and the art of war. Semjaza revealed enchantments and hidden incantations. Others taught astrology, cosmetics, the secrets of the stars. To some, it felt like progress. To heaven, it was corruption. Have you ever wondered why ancient myths across cultures all speak of gods giving fire or forbidden arts to mankind? Could those myths be fragmented echoes of this moment? But there is more. From these unions came children the Bible hints at but never names directly: the Nephilim, the giants. Genesis 6:4 calls them heroes of old, men of renown. Enoch calls them something else: blood, drinkers, destroyers, beings so voracious that they consumed all flesh and turned even on mankind itself. Picture a world where giants roam the fields, their footsteps shaking the ground, their hunger endless. Enoch does not describe them as myths, but as neighbors. Can you picture him walking past fields trampled by monstrous feet, heart-pounding as he warns his family to stay indoors at night? This is not poetic exaggeration. It is horror recorded in sacred text, and yet Genesis spares the details. Why? Some scholars argue this silence was intentional, a theological safeguard to keep Israel distinct from pagan myths. After all, Greek Titans and Mesopotamian Apkallu speak of similar unions between divine and human. Did later scribes fear that giving angels flesh would invite heresy, or worse, curiosity? Early church fathers debated fiercely. Tertullian defended Enoch, insisting it was divinely inspired. Others, like Augustine, recoiled from the angelic interpretation, favoring a safer view that sons of God simply meant Seth's lineage. But safer for whom? For theology, or for those who sought to control the narrative? The conspiratorial layers deepen when you consider how Enoch's messianic prophecies read centuries before Christ's birth. In the Book of Parables, Enoch describes the Son of Man, a figure pre-existent, enthroned beside God, judging kings and angels alike. The language is startlingly close to Jesus' own words in the Gospels. Could that have been too threatening for councils already wary of sects claiming secret knowledge? If this prophecy existed long before Bethlehem, what did it say about Christ's identity? And why, centuries later, did church authorities fear letting common believers see it? Enoch does not merely recount events. It takes you on a journey. He walks among chained angels buried under mountains. He peers into cosmic prisons, where flames roar and silence screams. He ascends through multiple heavens, guided by archangels, until he sees the throne of God itself, blazing like crystal and fire. Imagine Enoch's trembling, knowing he will return to earth with words men were never meant to hear. He writes of climbing higher and higher. Yet he confesses, "I could not lift my eyes. My bones shook within me." The closer he drew to the throne, the smaller he felt. Now ask yourself, if this book truly reveals so much about heaven's inner workings, about fallen angels, about the pre-existent Messiah, would you expect it to survive unaltered? Or would you expect it to vanish, buried under sand and time, surviving only where councils could not reach? But here is the secret no one mentions in Sunday sermons. The Book of Enoch did survive. It whispered from Ethiopian monasteries. It hid in Dead Sea caves. And when fragments resurfaced in the 20th century, scholars were forced to admit what they had long ignored. Early Christians read this book. Jude quotes it openly. The apostles knew it, yet it was erased from the canon. Did Enoch know, as he scratched these visions onto parchment, that one day men would call them heresy? Why? Was it too close to the truth, or was it exposing a truth mankind was never meant to hold? Next comes the darkest revelation yet, the crime of the Watchers, their unions and their monstrous offspring, and the judgment that drowned a world. But even there, buried in floodwaters, the story is not over. Picture this: 200 angels standing atop Mount Hermon. The wind shrieks across the stone, carrying the smell of cedar and the salt of distant seas. The stars burn strangely bright, as if heaven itself leans close to witness what is about to happen. Semjaza, their leader, speaks words so dangerous they echo through eternity. If one descends, all descend. They agree, binding themselves with an oath. And in that moment, something irreparable happens. Heaven and earth are no longer divided. These beings are called the Watchers, appointed to oversee humanity. Their task was vigilance. Their failure was intimacy. Why did they cross the line? Some ancient texts suggest curiosity, others lust, others rebellion against God's order itself. Imagine standing at the edge of perfection, watching fragile human life bloom in dust and sweat and song. Perhaps, over centuries, longing fermented into envy, perhaps holiness eroded into hunger, and then they fell. The Book of Enoch spares no detail. These angels descend in fire, luminous yet trembling. They take wives from among human women. Were these unions celebrated by the women or feared? Did the women know what they were bearing? The text is maddeningly silent on consent, offering only fragments, pregnancies, births, giants. The children of these unions are the Nephilim, giants, hybrids, beings who consume everything. Enoch records them as violent, cannibalistic, devouring not only human food, but human flesh. Their appetites are insatiable. Imagine a mother watching her half-angel child tower over her at 12 years old, voice deeper than any man's, eyes glinting with something not quite human. Imagine entire villages whispering about children who never sleep, who do not bleed, who kill for sport. Genesis 6:4 calls them heroes of old, men of renown, yet says little else. Why this silence? Is it reverent awe or deliberate omission? Compare this with Enoch's testimony, which names their fathers, details their crimes, records their bloodshed. Why would later scribes erase such detail? Did they fear confusion with pagan myths like the Greek Titans or Mesopotamian Apkallu, which tell eerily similar stories of divine human hybrids bringing forbidden knowledge to mankind? Or did they fear the implication that angelic rebellion is not only possible, but catastrophic? Consider Azazel, singled out for teaching warfare, metalworking, and the cosmetics that led humanity deeper into vanity. Semjaza, who taught enchantments and forbidden oaths. This is more than sin. It is technology. It is accelerated knowledge at the cost of innocence. Does that sound familiar? Humanity, reaching for secrets too high, too quickly, and paying the price. Enoch's visions give us not only facts, but feelings. The angels themselves begin to fear. As their children ravage the earth, the Watchers cry out in despair. They beg Enoch to intercede for them, to plead with God on their behalf. Picture these once radiant beings, now trembling, bound in chains of guilt long before they are chained in darkness. Can you imagine angels praying for forgiveness to the very God they defied? And here is where conspiratorial unease deepens. Why does Genesis omit these cries? Why does it skip from human wickedness to God's grief, leaving out the weeping of angels, the terror of mothers, the screams of giants? Is this omission an act of mercy, or an erasure so complete it rewrote the origin of the flood itself? Early Christian writers wrestled with this. Tertullian believed Enoch's visions were true prophecy, even citing them to explain fallen angels and Christ's coming judgment. Augustine, centuries later, dismissed the angelic interpretation entirely, insisting sons of God must be human, the line of Seth. Why the shift? Was it theology evolving or evidence being suppressed? Did councils choose the safer reading to keep congregations from dwelling on cosmic rebellion and hybrid offspring? And what does this mean for us? If Enoch's account is true, then the flood was not merely about human sin. It was about cleansing creation of angelic corruption. The very fabric of humanity was compromised. If that sounds too strange to accept, remember this. Jude 1:6 openly references angels who did not keep their own domain. Peter writes of them being cast into chains. These are not metaphors. They are fragments of a story too vast to fit in the canon. But Enoch preserves it in full, and for that, perhaps it had to be buried. Next comes the deeper terror, God's grief, the decision to flood the earth, not as blind wrath, but as surgical judgment to erase forbidden bloodlines. And even here, Enoch claims, secrets linger in the silence, secrets that whisper into our own age. Imagine the ground itself groaning beneath your feet. The rivers are swollen with blood. The wind carries the cries of the dying, mingled with an eerie silence that follows each wave of Nephilim violence. It is into this nightmare that one figure stands apart, a quiet shepherd of righteousness. His name is Noah. Genesis tells us Noah was perfect in his generations. Genesis 6:9. The Hebrew word tamim does not simply mean moral perfection. It suggests something unblemished, whole, uncorrupted. Was this a clue that Noah's bloodline had been untouched by angelic descent? If so, the flood was not only a judgment on human sin, but a precise act of cleansing, a targeted strike against hybrid corruption. And here lies the forbidden question. If this is true, why is it not made explicit in the canon? Why leave us guessing? Could it be that the councils who finalized Scripture found this truth too unsettling, too close to the myths of surrounding nations that spoke of God's breeding heroes and giants? Or was there another reason, political, theological, even fearful? Enoch's text dares to answer. It describes God's grief not as distant wrath, but as intimate heartbreak. The Lord of Spirits weeps over what the watchers have done and commands archangels to act. Michael, Uriel, Raphael are sent on missions of judgment. Azazel is bound and cast into a desert abyss, his face covered with jagged stones. The hybrid offspring of angels and humans are ordered to destroy each other in war, so their spirits may wander the earth as restless demons after death. Imagine it, giants screaming in battle against their own kind, oceans running red while the heavens fall silent. This is cosmic horror, creation itself recoiling from what has been unleashed. And yet, in Genesis, we receive only 4 cryptic verses. Why? The conspiratorial trail deepens in early church history. At first, Christian writers quoted Enoch freely. The Epistle of Barnabas cites him. The letter of Jude not only quotes him, but names him explicitly. Jude 1:14, 15. Early theologians like Tertullian and Athenagoras viewed the Book of Enoch as inspired. But by the time of Augustine, something shifted. Augustine rejected the idea of angelic unions entirely, reinterpreting sons of God as the godly line of Seth marrying the ungodly line of Cain. This interpretation spread rapidly. By the 4th century, councils like Laodicea began standardizing canon lists, and Enoch disappeared. Why the reversal? Was it doctrinal caution, fearing the blurred line between heaven and earth, or something deeper? A narrative like Enoch's does not merely challenge theology, it challenges control. If angels can fall, if forbidden knowledge can be given to mankind, what does that say about divine order, about the role of priests and councils? Suddenly, the cosmic drama is no longer tidy. It is messy, dangerous, filled with secrets. Think of the optics. A church seeking stability, unifying a fractured empire under Constantine's cross. Would it not be easier to silence texts that hint at angels lusting, giants feasting, and hidden messianic figures enthroned before Bethlehem? Easier to present sin as wholly human rather than cosmic? What? Easier to erase the blood-stained fragments than confront what they reveal about God's grief and the universe's war? And then comes the most haunting detail of all, Enoch's prophecy of the Son of Man. Long before the Gospels, Enoch describes a pre-existent heavenly figure, seated beside God, executing judgment on angels and kings alike. This figure is luminous, worshipped by all nations, a divine mediator who will judge the living and the dead. Does that sound familiar? Jesus repeatedly called himself the Son of Man. He quoted Daniel. Yes, but Enoch's vision predates Daniel. Could this be why the book was revered by early Christians, yet feared by councils centuries later? A prophecy so direct it could not be dismissed, yet too explosive to include in the canon. Picture the scene. Dusty scrolls hidden in desert caves, words inked in Aramaic and Ge'ez, whispers among monks who know what the councils erased. The prophecy of Enoch, foretelling Christ, describing angels in chains, and predicting a judgment yet to come. And you are left asking, did they silence this because it was false, or because it revealed too much truth? But that silence is cracking. The Dead Sea Scrolls unearth fragments long buried, fragments that vindicate Enoch's prominence among Second Temple Jews. This was no fringe myth. This was mainstream belief, erased from memory by the very hands that shaped our Bible. And that erasure might hold the key to understanding not only the flood, but the future. Picture a dimly lit chamber in the 4th century. The air is thick with incense and heated whispers. Bishops sit in semicircles, parchment in hand, their voices hushed yet urgent. Outside, the Roman Empire itself teeters between collapse and newfound Christian authority. Within, a decision is being made, not simply about theology, but about what stories future generations will even be allowed to hear. Enoch's book is on the table. The very text that early Christians once quoted without hesitation, the same visions of angels and judgment that shaped apocalyptic hope, is now being reconsidered. At councils like Laodicea, around 363 AD, decisions are quietly reached. Certain books will no longer be read publicly in churches. Enoch is among them. No proclamation of heresy is shouted. No public outrage. It simply disappears, a silence more telling than condemnation. Why this silence? The reasons are layered. Politically, the church is stabilizing under imperial favor. Constantine's conversion had transformed Christianity from a persecuted sect to a state religion. Stability, not speculation, was now prized. Apocalyptic books like Enoch, with their vivid imagery of angelic rebellion and coming judgment, threatened to reignite messianic fervor that could destabilize an already fragile empire. Culturally, the Book of Enoch belonged to a strain of Jewish thought that was increasingly sidelined. After the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD, Rabbinic Judaism rejected many apocalyptic texts, focusing instead on the Torah and oral traditions. By the time the Christian councils met, the Jewish communities that revered Enoch were already scattered, their texts fading from mainstream memory. Theologically, Enoch presented troubling implications. The story of angels mating with humans, birthing giants, and teaching forbidden arts, this blurred the boundary between heaven and earth. It suggested cosmic sin, not merely human sin, as the cause of the flood. And most provocatively, Enoch's vision of the Son of Man, enthroned beside God, prefigured Christ so explicitly that later church authorities may have feared it could empower rival sects or challenge emerging doctrines about Christ's nature. Imagine being in that council chamber. You can almost hear the scratching of quills as the canon lists are drafted. Which books inspire reverence? Which ones breed dangerous questions? Which texts grant too much knowledge to ordinary believers? Picture the candlelight flickering on wax tablets as debates rage: angels and giants versus kings and prophets, apocalypse versus orthodoxy. And then, the decision: Enoch will not be included. Not because it lacks power, but perhaps because it holds too much. The suppression is not total. Whispers of Enoch survive on the fringes. In Ethiopia, where the Orthodox Church preserves it as scripture, and in isolated monasteries that guard it as forbidden treasure. But in the West, the text is buried. Its memory lingers only in faint echoes. Jude's cryptic quote, Peter's allusion to angels in chains, fragments hidden in the margins of commentaries. Centuries pass. Manuscripts decay. The world forgets. Yet even this forgetting feels deliberate. Have you noticed how Enoch's visions are absent from Sunday readings? How his name is barely mentioned in sermons, even though Genesis says he walked with God and was taken without death? Have you wondered why a figure so holy is granted so few verses, while less righteous figures are given chapters? This silence creates a vacuum, a mystery that begs to be filled. And in that vacuum, legends arise. Medieval texts hint at Enoch's secret wisdom, his writings hidden in heavenly vaults. Mystics whisper of cosmic calendars and angelic hierarchies preserved in forbidden scrolls. Some speculate that fragments of Enoch circulated secretly among sects labeled heretical, fueling underground beliefs about the end times. And here lies the paradox. By silencing Enoch, the councils did not erase him. They made him mythic. His absence became presence. His omission became a lure. Each century that passed without his book only deepened the sense that something vital had been hidden. This is where the conspiracy turns prophetic. In the 18th century, explorers stumble upon complete manuscripts of Enoch in Ethiopia. In the 20th century, fragments surface in the Dead Sea Scrolls, confirmation that Second Temple Jews revered Enoch widely, that Jesus and the apostles likely knew the text intimately. The silence imposed by councils begins to crack, and with each fragment unearthed, the forbidden story grows louder. Could it be that Enoch's burial was temporary by design? That his words, hidden for centuries, were destined to resurface when the world approached a time as in the days of Noah? Are we living in that time now? And if so, what does it mean that the book once banned is speaking again? The rediscovery does not merely answer old questions, it forces new ones. If Enoch was excluded for political convenience, what else was omitted? If fragments are re-emerging, is the canon complete? Or is history itself about to be rewritten? But before we answer, we must trace how his voice resurfaced, and why its return unsettled modern theology, just as it did ancient councils. Picture this: centuries of silence. The councils have spoken, the parchments have yellowed, and the memory of Enoch drifts into whispers. For over a millennium, Western Christendom barely speaks his name. Sermons pass over him quickly, scholars relegate him to the margins, and believers forget that once early Christians clung to his visions with trembling reverence. It is as if the earth itself swallows him, waiting for an appointed hour to give him back. Then, in the late 18th century, that silence cracks. In 1773, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce stumbles through the highlands of Ethiopia and into a monastery unlike any he has seen. The monks, guardians of a faith as ancient as the hills, bring him to a small library thick with dust and incense. There, in Ge'ez script, lies something Western scholars have not seen in centuries: the complete Book of Enoch. Bruce holds in his hands what church councils once buried, what theologians declared unnecessary, what countless believers forgot. Can you feel the weight of that moment? A text long erased now returned, like a voice rising from the grave. But here is where the conspiracy deepens. Why Ethiopia? Why there, on the very fringes of the Christian world? The Ethiopian Orthodox Church had always kept Enoch as scripture, treating it not as apocrypha, but as holy. Unlike Rome, they never feared its visions of angels, giants, and cosmic judgment. They sang its words in liturgy, preserving what others had cast aside. Did Providence choose them as keepers? Or did human councils silence a voice they found inconvenient? Fast forward to the 20th century. The Dead Sea Scrolls emerge from caves near Qumran, brittle fragments sealed away since before Christ. Among them, to the shock of scholars, are pieces of Enoch, proving the book's prominence in Second Temple Judaism, proving that the earliest followers of Jesus likely read it, proving that Jude's quotation of Enoch was no isolated anomaly. The fragments speak with eerie familiarity: fallen angels, cosmic prisons, judgment upon kings and mighty men. Details that Genesis leaves veiled, Enoch unveils in sharp, terrifying clarity. Ask yourself, why do these discoveries always feel like interruptions? Why do they surface in deserts and caves, hidden in places no empire could easily reach? Could it be coincidence or divine design? A voice silenced for centuries, waiting until the world nears conditions eerily similar to those days of Noah. And notice the timing. When Enoch resurfaces in modern scholarship, humanity itself is tampering with genetics, weaponry, and knowledge once considered forbidden. We split atoms, map genomes, talk openly of artificial intelligence. The very boundaries between human and divine, mortal and machine, blur again. Do you see the parallels? The Watchers once taught forbidden arts, warfare, metallurgy, enchantments. Today, we play with powers that alter creation itself. Are we repeating their rebellion in new forms? The rediscovery of Enoch forces uncomfortable questions upon modern faith. If early Christians revered it, why do most churches ignore it now? If Jesus and his apostles knew it, why was it silenced? Was the exclusion of Enoch purely theological, or was it political? protecting hierarchies that feared what this book revealed. And perhaps the most haunting question: if this book warned of angelic rebellion, hybrid offspring, and judgment by flood, what warnings does it hold for the end of the age? Because here is the unsettling truth: Enoch's prophecies do not end with the flood. They leap forward, speaking of a final judgment, of angels unbound, of heavenly thrones, and a pre-existent Son of Man who judges both men and angels. The rediscovery of this book is not just about the past, it is about the future. It hints that the story is not finished. Enoch had spoken into silence, never knowing if anyone would hear. Now, millennia later, his whispers rise from desert caves, trembling still. So imagine this moment in your own hands. A scroll once hidden, now unrolled. You trace the faded ink with trembling fingers. The silence of centuries breaks. The question is not only why it was silenced, but why it speaks again now. Enoch's prophecies do not speak only of the flood that ended one world. They speak of another reckoning still ahead. This is where the line between past and future begins to blur, where his visions of giants and angels collide with Christ's warnings of the last days. Jesus himself once said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." Matthew 24:37. To most, this is merely a poetic comparison, a reminder of human wickedness. But if Enoch's visions are to be believed, the days of Noah were more than moral failure. They were days when heaven and earth blurred, when watchers mingled with humanity, when forbidden knowledge rushed into the world unchecked. Does Christ's warning hint that such conditions will rise again? Or have we misunderstood what those days truly were? Look closely at Enoch's text, and you find unsettling echoes. He saw angelic prisons beneath the earth, chains rattling as rebellious spirits await release. He saw cosmic judgments where kings and mighty ones tremble. He saw a heavenly Son of Man, radiant and eternal, who comes not merely to rescue but to judge. The parallels to Revelation are undeniable. Thrones, books of deeds, angelic hosts descending. Yet Revelation made it into the canon while Enoch was cast aside. Does this exclusion reveal fear of redundancy or fear of confirmation? Consider the timing of Enoch's return to public knowledge. As fragments emerged from Qumran's caves, the modern world entered an age of rapid technological leaps. We manipulate DNA, speak of hybrid embryos, and peer into the heavens searching for alien life. Ancient fears of forbidden unions and corrupted creation suddenly feel less distant. Are these mere coincidences or warnings resurfacing precisely when humanity dares once again to play with the boundaries of creation? And ponder this: modern fringe theories speak of Nephilim bloodlines, secret societies, and even alien visitations. While much of it stretches beyond evidence, does their persistence hint at a deep memory humanity cannot quite erase? Why do so many cultures remember beings who descended, taught forbidden arts, and left behind legends of giants? Could Enoch's record be less myth and more memory? Enoch's visions also confront us with an uncomfortable question about divine justice. If angels can fall, if heaven itself can fracture, what does that mean for the stability of creation? Does judgment come only for man or for all beings who rebel? And if the Son of Man sits enthroned to judge angels, what does that reveal about Christ's nature? Is he more than Messiah, something eternal, seated beside God before Bethlehem itself? The rediscovery of Enoch has done more than fill scholarly gaps. It has reignited questions about the nature of prophecy and suppression. Did the councils who excluded Enoch believe they were protecting Christians from error? Or did they fear that too much detail about angels and cosmic rebellion might lead believers into dangerous speculation? And if suppression was partly protective, what does that say about humanity's readiness for truth? Perhaps the most haunting reflection is this: Enoch's words survived against impossible odds. Hidden in Ethiopia, preserved in caves, resurfacing just as humanity begins to confront apocalyptic anxieties again. Could this timing be providential? Could God allow silence until the appointed season of unveiling? Or are we reading too much into coincidence? The scroll is open now. The words, cannot be unread. Whether they warn or comfort, they linger in the air like incense, pulling the mind toward an approaching horizon. If the days of Noah are to come again, will we recognize them when they arrive? Or will we, like those before the flood, go on eating and drinking, unaware of what rises in the shadows? The scroll closes, its dust rising like a quiet prayer into the still air. The echoes of Enoch's words linger, neither fully silenced nor fully understood. We have traced his journey from the brief mention in Genesis to the vast visions recorded outside the canon. We have followed his steps through ancient valleys and hidden heavens, into courts of angels and whispers of rebellion. And still, the questions remain unanswered. Why would a man so close to God, a man who walked with him and was no more, Genesis 5:24, have his writings buried? Why would a text quoted by Jude, reverenced by early Christians, and preserved by an ancient church be cast aside by others? Was it fear of misunderstanding? Concern for purity of doctrine? Or did Enoch reveal truths so heavy that later generations could not bear their weight? We have seen how his visions describe angels bound in chains, giants drowned beneath floodwaters, and a Son of Man enthroned before creation itself. We have traced how those visions echo through Christ's own warnings about the last days, as it was in the days of Noah, Matthew 24:37. We have glimpsed the parallels to Revelation, the hints of cosmic cycles and divine judgments still to come. But whether these connections were silenced out of caution or erased out of fear remains a mystery that no council decree can fully explain. And now, as fragments of Enoch's words resurface in our own age of rediscovery, the question turns to us: are these writings merely echoes of forgotten myths? Or are they reminders, preserved for a moment when humanity might once again stand at the threshold of great upheaval? Perhaps silence was never the end of this story. Perhaps it was only a pause. If Enoch's book was hidden until now, what might it mean that we are hearing it again? And if his visions spoke of angels and judgment, do they still speak to us? If this journey stirred something in you, do not let it vanish in the noise. There are more whispers hidden in Scripture's pages, waiting to be uncovered. Stay with us. Subscribe, listen closer, and keep walking this narrow road between thunder and silence. And let me know your thoughts or questions in the comments section.